news. A heartbreaking day in Florida, and sadly an all too familiar one. 17 people are now confirmed dead. We know at least 3 people still in critical condition after police say that a shooter, believed to be just 19 years old, opened fire at his former high school.
The topic of gun control has become an increasingly important issue around the world. Mass shootings and gun violence have become more prevalent, and sadly, gun laws have remained unchanged in most countries, especially the ones who seem to need it the most. The accessibility of firearms has made it almost impossible to avoid gun-related crime, and without the implementation of stricter firearm policies, these tragedies will continue to happen. Strict gun laws are absolutely necessary for countries to establish and enforce in order to protect the populations from this needless violence for several reasons. First, more gun deaths occur when citizens have easier access to guns. Second, gun laws are proven to reduce the amount of gun violence when policies are established. Finally, countries with stricter gun laws were able to drastically decrease the amount of gun violence in their countries in comparison to those with less strict laws. The first reason why gun laws should be established is because in countries where guns are easily obtained by citizens, more guns simply translate to more gun-related deaths. For example, in the United States, the Second Amendment of their Constitution declares that a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of people to bear arms shall not be infringed. This amendment essentially protects the right of people to access and own guns. It allows people to buy guns and have a sense of protection from owning one. This amendment is one of the biggest reasons why, in 2017, the most recent year for which the data is available, 39,773 people in the US died from firearms. This statistic consists less of mass shootings and more from suicides and homicides related to guns. Accessibility is the key issue here, because if guns were not available to the general public, these deaths would likely not have occurred. The numbers also reflect the reliance that the population has on using firearms for protection, which can cause accidental or unnecessary gun use, often in the name of self-defense. For example, after the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, where a 20-year-old man killed 20 students and 6 adults, the number of accidental deaths related to guns rose significantly. This was due to the fact that post-shooting there was a spike in gun purchases, so more people had access to guns. Easy access to guns in the United States due to the Second Amendment is also directly linked to an increase in suicides. More than 60% of the nearly 40,000 annual gun deaths in the US were determined to be suicide-related. Therefore, by decreasing the accessibility to guns, people in these desperate circumstances will not have guns to turn to, and the result is that the number of suicides will decrease. Some may argue that these people will find another method of doing so should they wish to end their lives. However, studies have proven that people contemplating suicide do so shortly after. People who turn to guns rather than other methods are much more likely to actually die. A second factor to consider regarding gun laws is that enacting strict policies have proven to greatly reduce the amount of gun violence after those policies were put into place. An example of such a policy is the U.S. Domestic Violence Offender Gun Ban, also called the Lautenberg Amendment. This amendment to the 1968 Gun Control Act excludes domestic abuse offenders from being able to purchase firearms. The result was a decrease in the number of gun deaths by 17%. Excluding this segment of the population from gun ownership has had a great impact on the number of gun deaths. Another report supports this statistic by showing that in at least 54% of mass shootings, the shooter also shot a current or former relative or partner. This amendment clearly shows how keeping firearms out of the hands of high-risk individuals reduces the amount of gun-related deaths. It has also been proven that increasing the sentence for gun crimes has decreased the amount of crime related to firearm use. Gun robbery rates have decreased in certain US states by 5% according to a 40-year analysis of gun robbery cases. Even though a 5% decrease in gun robberies does not appear to be much, this piece of evidence shows how a slight change in legislation can have a great impact on the crime rate of a country over time. It is also important to ensure that existing gun laws remain in effect and do not expire, since they help to reduce the amount of gun violence. In the United States, Congress let a 1994 ban on assault weapons expire in 2004, and not surprisingly, the result was an increase in gun massacre deaths. The expiration of this ban allowed US citizens to buy military-style firearms along with large-capacity magazines. This was unfortunate because when the ban on assault weapons was instituted in 1994, the number of mass shootings and massacre deaths decreased by 37% that year and 43% the following year. After the expiration of this ban in 2004, mass shootings and massacre deaths increased up to 183% and 239% during the same time periods. This clearly displays how removing the ban on military-style firearms and large-capacity magazines resulted in an increase of such massacres. The final reason to implement strict gun laws is that regions with stricter gun laws have less gun violence than areas with more relaxed gun laws. In the US, where state laws can differ, those states with stricter gun laws combined with greater spending on healthcare and mental health services have shown to have fewer school shootings. Efforts made to ensure background checks are done properly up front and placing limits on the quantities of ammunition purchased resulted in less gun-related incidents. This shows how limiting the access to firearms and ammunition in the first place makes a difference, especially when investing in their citizens' physical and mental well-being too. Weapon buyback programs have also been very successful in reducing the number of mass shootings. After a mass shooting in Australia in 1996 that left 35 people dead, the Australian government introduced a gun control legislation that allowed citizens to sell their weapons back to the government for the purpose of destroying them. This legislation was very successful and decreased firearm suicides by 65% and homicides by 59% over the subsequent 10 years. An amazing statistic is that Australia has not had a mass shooting since, and prior to the incident had 13. It is evident that stricter gun laws contributed to the decline in their gun violence rate compared to other areas without these programs and laws. Findings by the Board of Managers for the American Association for the Surgery of Trauma support the effectiveness of stricter gun laws as well. They presented a paper with 14 recommendations in an attempt to reduce gun-related deaths and support safe firearm ownership in the US based on the real-world experiences from treating gun violence victims in their hospitals. Some of these recommendations are already in use in Switzerland, where Swiss authorities keep a log of all gun owners. 1 out of 4 people legally own guns, and there hasn't been a mass shootings in 2 decades. Some of these laws exclude those from buying guns if convicted of a crime, have a drug or alcohol addiction, or who express a violent or dangerous attitude. This shows how countries with stricter gun laws have been able to reduce gun violence to a greater degree compared to those who have more relaxed gun laws. In conclusion, the evidence points to the fact that strict gun laws are extremely important for countries to have in place if their citizens are going to be protected from gun violence. Even though this topic has been discussed more in recent years with the increased number of school shootings in the US, it is clear that stricter gun laws result in less gun incidents. Places without strict laws still experience unacceptable levels of gun massacres, crimes, and death. Laws like the Second Amendment in the United States are contributing factors to the number of gun-related incidents by allowing too much accessibility to guns. Just because people are granted the right to bear arms in their constitution, the mindset needs to change so that people don't actually buy guns or think they need it in the first place. Strict laws help keep guns out in the hands of convicts, ensure proper background checks when buying a gun, and also limit the ammunition quantities, all of which help to reduce gun violence. This is especially true when efforts are combined with funding services for citizens' physical and mental well-being. Finally, countries with stricter policies simply have less gun incidents compared to countries with lax police. Australia and Switzerland need to be the examples that countries like the US look to when addressing gun violence because strict gun laws simply work.